And we are live on YouTube. So please go right ahead.
Hi, welcome everybody. We're so delighted that you've joined us for this session at the UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development 2020. This is part of the special event series on SDG Learning and Training 2020. We have a really wonderful panel assembled for you to discuss accelerating action through digital technologies, strengthening digital skills and capacities for human well-being. This session was jointly organised by the ITU and UNITAR. The session will run for 1.5 hours. My name is Ursula Weinhoven. I'm the representative of the ITU to the UN here in New York, and I'm really delighted to be your moderator for this critical theme, one that has become ever more relevant and urgent in the context of the current pandemic. We'll hear opening remarks from leaders at the ITU and UNITAR, and then I'll introduce our panelists. Please feel free to pose your questions and comments in the Q&A. You should have a button on your screen for that purpose. You can post them at any time, and we'll have a Q&A session after all the panelists have presented. We are recording the session, and you'll be able to find the recording on the YouTube UNITAR page. Without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Director, Telecommunication Development Bureau of the ITU. Doreen, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ursula, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this virtual event on strengthening digital skills and capacity. It's great to see so many participants joining online to discuss a topic that has become so pressing in light of the global pandemic that continues to ravage our countries and our communities. I want to begin by thanking UNITAR for partnering with the ITU in the organization of this event, and I want to warmly also welcome my colleague Einar, the Director of Satellite Applications and Applied Research at UNITAR, who will also shortly share his opening remarks to help us frame our discussions this afternoon. Last year's high-level political forum, we had the opportunity and pleasure of collaborating on a very successful joint session with UNITAR that was part of the DESA UNITAR capacity building and knowledge workshops. And it's really great to have the opportunity once again to join forces and contribute to the important work around building a roadmap to foster digital skilling of the global population. In the midst of the global crisis, the theme of this year's HLPF, Accelerated Action and Transformative Pathways, Realizing the Decade of Action and Delivery for Sustainable Development, has assumed a new dimension because COVID has thrown a sharp spotlight on what it really means to be unconnected in the digital age. There is no doubt whatsoever that the next 10 years of our UN Decade of Action will also be a decade of ever more rapid technological progress. And I really believe that the transformative pathways and accelerated action that we're searching for to drive faster progress towards the SDGs need to be built on broadband. Digital technologies are the vital catalyst that's going to help us to achieve the global goals, and the UN Secretary General's roadmap on digital cooperation made that very clear. And of course, empowering people to use, adapt, and develop digital tools will be fundamental. It's going to be a fundamental stepping stone to progress on each and every one of the 17 SDGs. The COVID pandemic has underscored the critical importance of meaningful connectivities to people's livelihoods, to employment, to health, well-being, education, and social participation. And the crisis has also served as a wake-up call to the global community to renew efforts to connect the 3.6 billion people, and I stress, 3.6 billion people that are still totally offline. We have never faced a situation of greater urgency, and if there can be one positive outcome out of this terrible global catastrophe, it will be universal recognition of the importance of digital infrastructure, services, and skills. We have a once-in-a-lifetime chance to make real and rapid progress in connecting the world, and digital skills development is a critical part of that. Around the world, in poor countries, but also in rich countries, millions of students that have been out of school have lost access to formal education due to the lack of connectivity, due to the lack of skills and capacity to use digital tools. And tragically for some, this may represent a lost opportunity that may be difficult, if not impossible, to recoup, and can ultimately negatively impact on their life choices for decades to come. Ensuring that all young people have access to the extraordinary power of online learning and the wealth of resources that it offers to communities lacking resources like books and teachers is what prompted ITU to partner with UNICEF on a bold new initiative that we call GIGA. And the GIGA vision is to connect every school on the planet to the internet and every child to information, opportunity, and choice. We're moving quickly to get our first round of pilot countries up and running, and with an ambitious global rollout schedule and active recruitment of partner organizations, because simply there's no time to lose. In addition, with technology now at the heart of just about every economic sector, the world is already contending with a massive digital skills gap. There's thousands of job vacancies out there that go unfilled each year simply because of the lack of the digital skilled workforce. And what a missed opportunity to bring greater diversity to the global tech industry and well-paid jobs to millions that so desperately need it. When we finally get to a post-COVID world, governments and educational institutions and industry need to come together and react quickly by putting digital at the heart of every nation's recovery. Building back better is going to mean prioritizing policies and programs that dramatically boost connectivity and digital competence. And one of the key missions of the ITU's Development Bureau is to strengthen human skills and capacities in the field of telecommunications and digital technologies. And bridging the digital divide will only become a reality when people everywhere have access to information, products, and services, and are also equally equipped with the digital skills that they need to match the employment and entrepreneurship requirements of the fast-growing digital economy. Finding effective ways of nurturing those digital skills and capacity development are going to be critical elements to help every country, every community, and every citizen to fully leverage the transformational power of digital to improve their lives and also to drive sustainable development. Working in partnership with other stakeholders, our programs aim to ensure that younger generations are equipped with these digital skills, the skills that they need to benefit from employment opportunities, and also adult professionals that they can access ongoing digital reskilling and upskilling across sectors. Developing a digitally skilled population involves the entire socioeconomic system, starting with clear, committed government policy, and also extending to primary and secondary schools, universities, adult training institutions, the private sector, and civil society. As the demand for digital skills continues to grow exponentially, countries need to ensure that they've put in place well-structured approaches that will help to identify current skills levels and also to predict and to prepare for future requirements. And these are just some of the issues that we've been focusing on, and we will continue to focus during the course of our discussion this afternoon or this morning, New York time. They have never been more compelling, and I really look forward to learning more and also to benefit from the wisdom of all of you joining us this afternoon, this morning, and of course, the experience of our distinguished expert speakers. And with that, I thank everyone for joining the discussion today and hand the floor back to you, Ursula. Over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doreen. And now we turn to our opening remarks also from UNITAR to Mr. Einar Bjorgo, Director, Division for Satellite Applications and Applied Research at UNITAR. Einar, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula, and thank you so much, Doreen, for framing today's session so well. It's really a pleasure to work again with ITU. I would also like to really thank our UNITAR colleagues in New York for all their organizations for this event. It's really been a fantastic job. So thank you so much for that. Now, I would also like to reflect a little bit on the key objectives for this session. We have been talking a lot about digital knowledge, literary skills, and the importance on sustainable development in that regards. I hope that we, throughout this session, will be able to showcase and explain these digital skills assessments and how they can be implemented at the national level. Really looking forward to learn also more on that. And of course, also to provide you some examples, both from our own side here at UNITAR, but also from other panelists and potentially also other colleagues joining the call among the audience. Also, how we can use capacity development, which is sort of the core mandate of UNITAR, if you like, in collaboration with ITU and other partners to see how we can use digital technologies to transform a country's abilities to achieve the sustainable development goals. So with that, I would like to just show you a few slides, if you allow me just to share my screen. Maybe some of you remember from last year, we during the launch event of the Learning Center, we launched something called UN SDG Learn. This has basically a platform and with several components to it, open to both UN agencies, international organizations, academia, civil society, and business. So basically, when we are what we have assessed over this last 12 months or so is that there's been a high interest in this platform. And really, it's about using this kind of platforms to promote all the various skill sets that are needed, including, of course, very much the digital skill sets that we're talking about here today. So thanks to all the more than 50 participating organizations, we're able to really provide a large number of courses, 184 courses, and also 122 micro-learning courses. Micro-learning is something that I'm sure we'll hear a lot of during the high-level political forum, especially the Learning Center events. This is something that is really starting to take off. Angus may also explain a little bit in that sense. But really, micro-learning is something that we are following very closely and seeing how we can best contribute to that. But in terms of UN SDG Learn, it has basically three components: a platform, the partnership, and the program. So the platform is a gateway to the various learning solutions that our partners are providing. It is not a platform that hosts all the courses. It is providing links and making sure that depending on your specific interest and requirements and learning needs, you can get easy access to this. There's also a full community of practitioners on learning solutions for the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs through the partnerships. And also, of course, we're looking at joint learning initiatives for integrated learning and support to countries. Now, of course, this also depends very much on people's interest. And when you are looking at SDGs and looking at digital skills according to SDGs, we have a nice search function on this site. So you can basically triage, if you like, and filter your searches, both according to SDGs, but also other specific thematics. So I would encourage interested parties to go and really take a look at this. We have also regional pages. We also have a dedicated statistics page. So this is something that in terms of access to digital courses or learning is quite interesting. We have had so far more than 47,000 users on this. And you can see from the pie chart that over half is from Asia. quite a few from the Americas, from Africa, from Europe, and a little bit from Oceania. In terms of the gender breakdown, 57% male, 42% female. And what is also interesting, I think, is if you look at the population distribution, we see a very high interest in this kind of learning platforms, both from the 18 to 24-year-olds, as well as the 25 to 34-year-olds. So I think that is quite an interesting demographics as well when we're looking at this. We also at UNITAR do other types of let's say digital skills development, and I would like to pay your attention to something that maybe not many of you are that familiar with, but when it comes to use of space technologies, we have a project that is quite interesting. I would just take a few moments to explain it. It is a project financed by the UK Space Agency and their international partnership program called Common Sensing, which is all about building climate resilience within small island nations. And we are using, in this sense, space technologies. So we're looking at various elements, and we have done also, as it's been outlined here during this session, we have done a very careful needs assessment as to what kind of digital skills and tools are needed by talking to the various government departments and ministries in the countries of Fiji, Vanuatu, and the Solomon Islands. So from this, we are then developing various solutions in terms of both food security, in terms of climate forecast, in terms of disaster risk management, and also, quite importantly, in terms of climate finance. So by using space technologies coupled with capacity development, we are able to assist the countries with increase in access to climate funding. So just as an example of how this type of technologies can be used very pragmatic and very directly. And of course, capacity development is absolutely fundamental. We have done several training sessions in these 3 countries, and we are looking at how to also go to other countries with this kind of same methodologies, let's say. So it's something that we're quite excited about, and we see really how this is appreciated with the countries. Of course, capacity development should be seen as a long-term effort. It is not by providing a very short course, either face-to-face, blended learning, or fully online, that one has developed true capacities over time. But by being there with the countries over time, also digital skills that sometimes can take some time to develop, and even more important, I would say, integrate into decision-making processes at the governmental level, can take some time. So it's important to be there with the governments, and we are quite fortunate in this sense to be hosted by the governments of Fiji, Vanuatu, and the Solomon Islands, and hosting and having technical experts there, sitting with them, learning from them, and providing solutions to them. So I just wanted to also give sort of as part of the opening a little bit of practical examples of what we are doing in this sense. And as I said, very much looking forward to this session and to see and learn also from our other colleagues and from the audience how this extremely important element of digital skills can best be applied in support of sustainable development. So thank you very much, and back to you, Ursula.
Thank you so much, Einar, and to both our opening speakers for your great framing for the discussion that we're about to have. And Einar, actually, we've already got a request for the link for the platform that you spoke about. Perhaps you could paste that into either into the chat so that folks can see that. So now let us turn to our distinguished panel. I'll mention them all by name first, and then we'll turn to our first one. We have Susan Telcher, Head Capacity and Digital Skills Development from the ITU. We have Stacey Wedlake, Research Analyst and Coordinator, Technology and Social Change Group from the University of Washington in the United States. We have Angus Mckay, Director, Division for Planet at UNITAR. That's got to be one of the best names for a division that I've heard. And we have Abraham Kofi Asante, CEO of Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communications. So thank you everyone for joining us again, and thank you for the panelists for coming together today. Let us now turn to our first one. Susan Telcher, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ursula. Hello from Geneva, and good morning, good day, good afternoon to everybody. It's a great pleasure for me to start off this session, which focuses on digital skills and capacities for inclusive development and human well-being. And I would like to address in my short presentations 2 points. First, I would like to talk about the role of digital skills for development and for closing the digital divide. And second, I would like to share with you some concrete practical tools that we have developed in ITU and which can help countries to identify and tackle the widening digital skills gap. Next slide, please. So let me start with the question of why digital skills are so important for the SDGs and for accelerating SDG achievement. Let's put it simple. We now know how the digital transformation is impacting on all economic sectors, on education, on health, on agriculture, entrepreneurship, employment, gender equality, etc. And because of this digital transformation, ICTs can foster development across each of the SDGs. Indeed, they can accelerate progress if they are used appropriately. And this is where the skills and capacities actually come in. They are the precondition, they are the enablers. Without knowledge of digital technologies, without being able to use the digital products and services, people will not benefit from them and progress might actually be hampered. Marginalized groups might even be further marginalized. This is why it's so important to address the digital skills gap. Next slide, please. Let's have a look at COVID-19. So as the director of the BDT already mentioned earlier, if there's one thing or one aspect that clearly came out during the COVID-19 period, it's the importance of good connectivity and the fact that many people actually don't have it and were put at a disadvantage. According to UNESCO, about 90% of the schools were closed at some point during this period and 1.6 billion students out of school. So what does that mean in terms of remote learning and in terms of remote teaching? And according to ILO, around 94% of the global workforce were affected by workplace closures. So what does that mean for remote working? And what does it mean for the future? Will there be new ways of working and learning enabled by the use of technologies? But teaching, learning, or working from home also requires reliable and affordable connectivity, and it requires a digitally skilled population. But based on ITU data, 44% of the world population is still offline. And this is even the case in places where connectivity is available. So why do we have this gap between internet availability and usage, which I want to show you on the next slide, please? On this slide, you can see this gap between internet availability and internet usage, because what you can see is that about 90% of the world population today lives in an area that has broadband service coverage through 3G or higher technology. But only 54% are actually online or users of the internet. So we have to look a bit closer at this gap. Next slide, please. And in fact, this gap is the largest even in the least developed countries. You can see here on the slide, the red bar on the right-hand side is the LDCs group. You can see about 20% of the LDC population using the internet, but almost 80% living somewhere in an area where there is coverage by 3G mobile service. So in the LDCs, we have the biggest gap and the biggest challenges. People are not connected, people are marginalized and also left behind when it comes to sustainable development. People are most affected by the economic crisis that follows the pandemic, and they are facing this connectivity gap. And so we need to look at how we can address this gap. Next slide, please. And what we have found is that a very important, if not the most important issue to address the gap is to look at what are the barriers to internet usage in terms of digital skills. Because when you ask people for why they are not using the internet, about 2/3 give you answers that are related to education and skills, such as, I don't know what the internet is, I don't know how to use it, I have no interest, it's not useful to me. So it shows you how people are not aware or are not skilled in terms of using the internet and actually recognizing the benefits that it can bring. And this is particularly the case in among groups in least developed countries, low income groups, and those that are living in the communities. So the crisis is perhaps also an opportunity now, because people are starting to value connectivity if they haven't done it before, be it for work, for education, or for entertainment and also social life. Next slide, please. I would like to look at the digital skills gap a bit more. So in fact, the digital skills gap you can find at the global level. It's everywhere, but it's at different levels. So skills are needed at the very basic level. This is to bring people online who have not used digital technologies before. But there's also a huge gap of a digitally skilled workforce in almost all countries across the world. And often such workers require intermediate level skills or advanced level skills, job ready skills, and skills for very particular ICT professions. Now, with so many people affected by unemployment following the crisis, the need for training on digital skills will become even more important in the future, because this is one area where many jobs could be found in the already now, but even more so in the coming period. Next slide, please. So we urgently need to address the digital skills gap, first for digital inclusion, as I mentioned before, to bring in people who have not used the internet before and digital technologies, but also because the digital economy requires a workforce that is fit for purpose. So we should look into digital skills education in schools. We need to look into reskilling and upskilling of the workforce. We need to look into lifelong learning, including outside the formal system. And in particular, when we talk about policy making and national strategies for digital skills policies, we need to look at a comprehensive needs assessment. And this is the second point I would like to stress in my presentation, on how we can assess what is actually the kind of skills that are needed in the countries, because only then we can address them. Next slide, please. So this is what I wanted to offer on this aspect, because ITU just launched in May 2020 a digital skills assessment guidebook. It is designed to help governments assess their skills, supply and demand, and also to determine what are the future skills gaps. So it's a practical tool for policymakers who are doing and developing their digital skills strategies and education policies. And I would like to mention that one of our panelists who will speak after me, Stacey Wedleck, was actually one of the main authors of this guidebook. So what is the main objective? It is precisely, has precisely been developed as a response to the urgent needs for governments to address the challenges related to the gaps. how can they identify what they need to do at the national level? First, you need to assess what are your digital skills needs in the country. Next one, please. Next slide. So while the main audience is policymakers, throughout the guidebook, we actually address the important issue of involving stakeholders, other stakeholders in carrying out the assessment. The private sector, academia, and non-governmental organizations. They will help to identify what are the skills gaps and demand in the country. Next slide, please. So we have basically 4 chapters. You can find the guidebook on our website. The first one will look at what are the existing skills assessment frameworks and approaches. The second chapter is then dedicated to step-by-step guidance on how to do assessment of the current skills levels or the skill supply. The third chapter is a step-by-step guidance on how to assess the skills needs in the countries. And the fourth chapter will help countries to carry out forecasting of skills requirements. Next slide, please. So to conclude and to summarize, this guidebook is designed in a way that it provides a lot of flexibility for countries to choose whatever approach fits them best, whatever their resource constraints are, whatever the stakeholders are they need to engage. And also it depends on the level of technological development, which of course is different in every country. Also, what are the main economic sectors? All of this is different across countries. So we have designed the guidebook in a way that it can be adapted to the different national situations, and countries can pick their assessment methods. So we are happy to provide further guidance to countries who are interested in using this guidebook. And then my last slide, please. This is just to give you an overview of the work we do in the field of digital skills. I invite you to check out our ITU Academy website, which gives you more information on all of these products and services. Next slide. Thank you very much. This is the link to the ITU Academy. Thank you very much. Back to Ursula.
Thank you so much, Susan. And now let us turn right away to Stacey Wedlake, Research Analyst and Coordinator, Technology and Social Change Group, University of Washington. Stacey, you have the floor. You might be muted, Stacey.
I am muted. Thank you very much. I even got a little message from Zoom. So let me start again. Sorry about that. Got too many buttons to click. Good morning from the West Coast of the US. I'm with the Technology and Social Change Group with the University of Washington Information School. And as I mentioned, I'm one of the co-authors of the ITU Digital Skills Assessment Guidebook, which I'll be briefly talking about here today. So really, in almost anywhere in the world, access and use of the internet has become a key factor in reducing you and your family's risk of infection of COVID-19. And often when talking about digital inequalities, the focus falls upon infrastructure. And I saw lots of comments in the chat about this. And it's, you know, of course, it's a incredibly important piece, but digital skills, as Susan was talking about, are a critical component to personal and community well-being as well. So as demonstrated in a recent article in the academic journal First Monday, Robinson and her co-authors show how the social and digital inequalities intersect with increased risk to COVID. So for example, someone that is exposed and unconnected must do everything face-to-face, you know, from work to, you know, personal communication. However, if they can get connected, and then they may still be exposed due to work, but they can reduce their frequency of face-to-face contact in other ways, and thus reducing their own personal risk and, again, the risk to others. Contrast that to someone who's privileged as myself, to be sheltered and connected, and I can conduct all my personal and professional business via these digital technologies. And again, this is about infrastructure and access to the actual technology through the devices, but it's also about skills. But before we dive into that, let's just review as kind of these technologies that most people use to use the internet, which Susan touched upon as well. And so I think that we probably all know here that far more people worldwide use the internet on their mobile devices than any other type of device. And so I have a chart here from data from ITU, and so you can see that the upper green line, that's the active mobile broadband subscriptions, and then way down the bottom, in the yellow line is the fixed broadband subscriptions, which is the wires into a house, which is how I am using my internet. And then in the middle are those the actual people using the internet. And so when we think about digital skills, we should think, again, we need to keep in mind that the vast majority of people using digital skills are using or applying those skills using on a mobile device. And so we should think about kind of those day-to-day digital skills that people need to kind of achieve their goals, that the fact that they're using mobiles. And even in my own research of public librarians in Kenya, even if they have wired internet at work and have access to laptops and desktops, people still rely heavily on their mobile devices to conduct their jobs and their personal mobile devices, and to be able to continue their work inside and outside the library walls. However, in our research, we found that many curricula and skills efforts tend to focus heavily on laptop and desktop centric skills and not about further developing mobile literacies. So when talking about digital skills, again, a lot of the focus tends to be on how to help people skill up to intermediate or advanced skills for computer-based employment. And has been already talked about here today, that it's critically important. There are many jobs that rely upon these skills and can help better people's lives. But it's also really important to focus on those basic skills so that people can actually start using those the technologies in their day-to-day lives. And so on this side, we see a map that shows that in 40 to 84 countries with available data, less than half of the population possesses basic computer skills, such as copying and pasting or sending an email with an attachment. And this map shows us that it's not a given that high-income countries' populations have these basic digital skills covered. So given all this, what digital skills do people need to accomplish their goals? And in the case of the pandemic, reduce their risks to themselves and their families. And so I really like the basic, intermediate, advanced breakdown that Susan presented earlier, but skills and competency frameworks can help us kind of dig a little bit deeper into thinking about different skill sets. And so I've highlighted 3 different frameworks here. These are also featured in the guidebook. So DigComp comes from the European Union, and so it's very focused kind of on the EU context, and divides digital competencies into 5 domain areas: information and data literacy, communication and collaboration, digital content creation, safety, and problem solving. And then UNESCO took this and wanted to adapt DigComp for a more global audience and to serve as a foundation for SDG indicator 4.4.2, which is the percent of youth and adults who have achieved at least the minimum level of proficiency in digital literacy skills. And their framework adds 2 additional competence areas, which is devices and software operations and career-related competencies. And that devices and software, I think, is kind of a nice, like, thinking about, again, those basic skills that people need in order to be able to start using the devices. And so these competency frameworks then have skills nested under them. And then DigComp actually has drilled down more into different proficiency levels. So it's quite detailed and can be a little overwhelming. And then kind of another approach is from kind of an academic standpoint, the Digital Skills to Tangible Outcomes project, which has been going on for probably for quite some time now. And it has the explicit aim of developing measures for digital skills and digital outcomes using surveys. And so, and the project divides skills into 5 categories. And then which is operational, information navigation, social, creative, and mobile. And then there's a corresponding scale of very specific skills that can be used for youth and adults. And so the first 2 frameworks are more, I think, development more tend to be for like kind of policy and educational kind of foundational documents that can be used in lots of different ways. And the last one is much more kind of straight out of the box for thinking about, like, these very granular skills and like how to measure them. And so again, sort of for kind of some different purposes here. And I really appreciate the last framework, how it specifically calls out and examines mobile specific skills. So how do we know if people have the skills that they need? One way that you can do this is via a country level national skills assessment. And these assessments are covered much more deeply in the guidebook, but I'll briefly talk about 3 different approaches here. So the first type of approach is a self-assessment. And here participants rate their own perception of their abilities, skills, or competence. And so at the national level, you can see that these most often take the form of a household survey, like Eurostat or the ITU household questionnaires. And then, of course, the Digital Skills with Tangible Outcomes has a validated survey that comes with that framework. And often this type of assessment is combined with other assessment types. The second type is knowledge-based, which is it's like a test using questions around factual or procedural knowledge. And this can be more valid than a self-assessment, but sometimes I find these assessments kind of test the wrong thing. So for example, I use Microsoft Word almost every day for work. But if you ask me, like in a multiple choice question, like, under which menu this particular function lies, I might get that wrong. However, if you tested that me in a more realistic scenario where I actually had to complete the task, I would get that right, which is what a performance-based assessment is. So it actually measures the digital skills in realistic scenarios using software. These tests, of course, are the most time-intensive and expensive and usually involve cooperation and some international effort. But they can give the most detailed and accurate data on digital skills. A significant downside to these types of assessments is they focus much more on laptop and desktop skills and in more traditional school and workplace situations. So if you're, like the guidebook kind of focuses a lot on kind of the skills for economic development, so that could be, if that fits your needs, then those could be a good type of assessment. So you can see each approach has its particular pros and cons. And as I just mentioned, there's really no right way to do these assessments. Each a country's approach will depend on that country's particular needs, capacity, and existing processes. And again, the guidebook gives a much more detailed instructions on how to make decisions and collect data. However, before I leave you here today, I just wanted to kind of, as a reminder that when measuring digital skills, it's very important to remember that digital inequalities often reflect society's inequalities. So it's crucial to pay attention when collecting data on marginalized groups in your country, because in order, you need to understand where their digital skills are, to more accurately understand the digital skills landscape and take the correct policy steps, which may or may not include technology at its center. So thank you very much for giving your time here for me today. Here are my references, which you can go to YouTube and pause later if you're interested in a particular source. And last but not least, here's my contact information. And I look forward to hearing the other panelists. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Stacey, and definitely you anticipated lots of interest in the materials you pointed to. Now let us turn to Angus Mckay, Director Division for Planet at UNITAR. Angus, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope that, can you give me a thumbs up, Ursula, that you can hear me and that you can also see my screen?
Both.
Very good. So great, so thank you. So UNITAR is very pleased to be associating with ITU for this event. Delighted. My talk will focus on one of the objectives of this event, which is about how digitally derived knowledge can lead to action or accelerated action on the SDGs. So in a sense, I mean, I would not portray myself as an expert on digital skills, as the previous speakers clearly are. But obviously, we're using a digital platform to get our message out on Planet, as Ursula kindly referred to my title, which caused much merriment when it came out. But I must say, Ursula, that the reason that it's Director of Planet is because UNITAR is aligned with the pillars of Agenda 2030. So that means that there's also a Director for Peace and so on. So I'm not the only one. But yes, it is an interesting title. So yeah, so my focus will be at more of a user perspective and reflecting a little bit on how digital technology is performing for us in relation to achieving action on the SDGs. And I'm going to speak about one program called UN Climate Change Learn. That's the sort of the experience that I have on this. It's an interesting one. It's been running about 10 years, but it's only been digitalized, if you like, for the past 4 or 5. It does hit SDG 4, SDG 8 on growth, and SDG 13 clearly on climate change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some performance data. I hope that will be of interest, and I think it sort of will illustrate some of the points that have already been raised, and then I'll offer a few conclusions before handing back. So firstly, how are we performing? Well, this slide shows you the number of certificates of completion issued on our e-learning platform, right? So you can see a fairly slow beginning, 2014, 15, and then it's consistently picked up since then. So we're just about to reach a very important milestone for us, which is 100,000 certificates of completion. So this is not 100,000 users. This is 100,000 individuals who have enrolled in a course, completed the course, and been objectively tested and passed, right? So it really means they've engaged, because it does take time to do these courses. So we're pleased about that. We do see a very sort of classical upward trend. Because it's climate change, a few interesting things have happened in the last year or so. I mean, we had the Greta effect, remember the Greta Thunberg effect, which continues, which started in 2019, and a massive increase from the teaching profession around the world. You know, there are 90 million teachers in the world, give or take. I mean, this is an incredible network and resource, and we're trying to reach out to them. And then obviously, more recently, we've had the lockdown, the COVID effect. And in fact, our data for 2020 is just to July. So we may have a much bigger spike reflecting that. But I guess the point behind this slide is that we are in business, and we are very much digitally in business. Now, a few other interesting facts. I'm not going to go on and on. I'm just going to give you a few of these. Now, Einar talked about the age profile for SDG Learn, and we've pretty much got exactly the same statistics. About 70% of our alumni are under the age of 30. Clearly, they're more comfortable in the digital zone. I mean, I think it's also partly because it's about climate change, which is more youth-driven. There's more mobilization going on in that particular area. I also think that younger people place more trust in the digital space, if you like, in terms as a means of achieving their objectives, be they educational objectives or be they beyond that into the workplace, building skills. So of course, this raises questions about everybody else, people of my age. I mean, how are the 40s and the over 40s acquiring their new knowledge and skills? And is there a wider trend here? And I think the previous presentations have hinted at what some of those barriers may be. Are they being left out? The coverage and scope of UNCC Learn is good. I mean, we know that we are used and known about in 198 countries and all the kind of parties to the UN Convention on Climate Change. And 80% of our learners are from developing countries, 52% female. Of course, this is great, but as others have said, it's accessibility and coverage is the key factor. And our concern, and I think Susan talked about this, Doreen talked about this as well, is as digitalization accelerates, it inevitably is doing and will do, are we going to have a greater and greater digital divide? And how do we address that? Will investments in digital infrastructure keep pace with demand and with this issue of access? We know there's a huge investment going on in sub-Saharan Africa, but will it be sufficient? Will it keep pace? Now, we've seen quite recently some quite positive announcements from major donors signaling that they're willing to look at a shift in resources away from traditional built infrastructure like roads and bridges towards digital infrastructure. Of course, that raises other issues, but this discussion is happening now at the highest levels, and it is right and proper that it should do so. Just moving now a little bit into the issue of impact, because ultimately it's all very well to do online training and so on and have lots of people, but what are people actually doing with the results with all of this? So in terms of the impact, again, pretty positive when you look at the overall numbers. 78% of our users have changed the way that they think about climate change based on our courses. Now, this is a survey of over 5,000. We do an annual survey, so it's 5,000 survey. I think we got about 500 responses, something like that. I'm not the greatest statistician in the world, and some people online may tell me that this is not relevant or marginally relevant, but I mean, hopefully it's good enough. 78% have changed the way that they think about climate change. 84% much more confident in advocating climate change, and a significant number also trying to influence communities and the authorities that they work with. And we have many, many documented examples of what that actually means in practice. One of them, for example, on influencing as a result of accessing a digital learning space is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ikram Rahman. He's from northern Pakistan. He's a project coordinator for UNDP, and he is working on a project to open up markets for certified timber and forest products for the communities in northern Pakistan. So he did one of our courses on forestry and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and so on. It's called the Red Plus Academy. And I think that the main thing he said was, well, I did the course and I felt so much more confident as a result, and therefore that my ability to engage with communities was that much more effective. So he attributes the fact that there's much more sustainable harvesting going on in his area, partly or quite significantly to the way that he was able to better engage as a result of having done the course. And he also told us, amazingly, that he got a raise from UNDP. So I worked for UNDP for many years, never got a raise, so I don't know what that means. But the important point behind that, and we've got some numbers on this as well, is that doing these courses online can actually have a significant impact on your career prospects and the way that you're valued within the workplace. This is actually, Ursula, this is my last set of numbers, and then I'm going to wrap up, so please don't panic. A little bit more on impact. 89% changed their behavior towards particularly consumption, for example, in their use of water or energy. And as I said earlier, 27% reported a positive change in their job status, and something like 8% receiving a pay rise, where they have attributed it as largely, 50% or more, it's self-assessed, but have attributed to having completed a course and received a certificate. And we've actually, what this means, that last one, by the way, can be monetized. And we've done some work on it, and we've been able to generate some cost benefit figures that show that this digital platform is operating at about a cost benefit of about 1.7, which is pretty good for training. And I think one of the reasons for that is because the cost of every certificate issued is very low, because we've got high volume. So we're actually issuing certificates at an average cost of $20. That all project managers out there worried about their training budgets, $20. So, this has to be part of the future. This has to be factored in. I'm in favor of face-to-face training, but I think if you can get across good quality learning for $20 a head, that has to be a big part of the future. I've got another example, but I'm going to leave it because we're probably running out of time. So I'm going to come to my last slide, which is a set of reflections. Well, firstly, the CC Learn platform is just one example. 3.4 billion, I heard, people not connected, and we're connecting with 500,000, and it's a small contribution, I know, but hopefully some of the experience from CC Learn can be useful and helpful in this debate. So, it's an example of how digital skills, if you have the skills to be able to engage with that platform, can provide access to cheap learning. I mean, all these courses are free, by the way, I didn't say that, but they're all free to the user. So if you have sufficient connection and digital skills, you can access this learning, and that can lead to changes in attitudes, behaviors, and action. And I think we do have the evidence to show that that is the case. But many people do not have those skills, as has been said, and do not critically have that access, in addition to which much of what we're offering is sort of offered more on the sort of iPad and standard screen rather than designed for mobiles. That's something we have to address. So there is a huge risk here of a digital skills divide between younger people and older people. Definitely that would be one, but also between those who do have access and those who don't. And this is probably the fundamental question that we are now dealing with at UNCC Learn, and why I'm so pleased to be involved in this discussion, in this debate. So we see action resulting from our courses, but how do we get this acceleration, but with inclusion, so that we're not accelerating a gap as we are accelerating our performance? So that's really my key question and my key message, and my thanks for listening, and handing back to you, Ursula.
Thank you so much, Angus. And just before we turn to our final speaker, I'd want to invite the speakers who've already spoken to visit the Q&A. Some of the questions are quite specific to your presentation, so please do feel free to answer those. And then, of course, we will have a Q&A session, so folks listening, please keep your questions coming. So now let us turn to Kofi Asante, CEO, Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communications. Kofi, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ursula. And thank you, the audience, for being part of this program. We're also delighted to be linked with the high-level discussion on this particular platform. I'll be given an outline. My outline will be on the overview of the Ghana digital economy, the digital capacities and skills critical to development, assessment of national digital skills needs, and to better target policies. And the last point that I'll be talking about is the outlook of future job markets and how to equip young people with the required digital skills demanded by the industry. Next slide. Next slide, please. The worldwide digitization and skills development is at the front of the achievement of the SDGs. And the pandemic, that is the COVID-19, can confirm the urgent need for us to scale up our digitization program so that we'll have much more digitized skills for us to be able to address issues that require that we do not have much contact on person to person. Let me indicate that the Ghana digital economy has reached a relatively advanced level of development in the sub-Saharan African region. And the ongoing digitization in all sectors of the national economy in Ghana, including the health service delivery, passport services, death and birth registry, digital property addressing system, National Information Contact Center, which has a short code of 311, where we collect information from citizens, and then the emergency call center for people who want services from the security services, like police, fire service, the ambulance services has also been provided. But notwithstanding all these developments, there remains a huge digital skill gap driven by both latent economic growth and ongoing digitization, which still exists. Next slide, please. The question here is that why are digital capacities and skills critical to development? They are critical because we want to fully achieve the digitization agenda and also for full digital transformation in our country, such that this would affect government institutions and local economic development. The reason is that as government puts in all these e-services, there's the need for the citizenry to also have the skills so that they can take advantage of these services. And those areas that suffer most are the rural areas, which are unserved or underserved in terms of connectivity and in terms of skills development. The reason here is that because of the fact that they do not have the capacities in terms of affordability or reliable connectivity, and the infrastructure is not available in such areas, they do not even have the opportunity for them to acquire the skills. So there's a combination of factors that need to be addressed here: provision of infrastructure, and then also making available the skills to them. And in some areas, which we call underserved and unserved in rural communities, even when the connectivity is provided, there's the need for devices to be also available. And therefore, we provide public places where they can take advantage of the public devices that are available in what we call community ICT centers. But now in the COVID era, how do you reconcile public place devices with personal devices? And it's a challenge that we need to address. Next slide. So the question, how can countries assess national digital skill needs to better target policies? The first one is for us to have a comprehensive assessment, which we did some comprehensive assessment on the areas of providing digital skills for teachers and for students. And that helped us to provide skills for about 600,000 teachers, students, and persons in the informal sector, like market women, dress makers, and mechanics. But now, having done that assessment and achieve what we have now, there's also the need for us to move into the areas where we have small and medium-sized businesses. And this is a study that we have commissioned as Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communication with the objective to examine the extent of the use of ICTs and identify the digital skill sets gap among the SME operators. The reason is that within the COVID era, we observed that most persons are working from home. And if they are working from home, how would they be able to work if they do not have digital skills? And even when they have digital skills, how would they be able to work from home if they do not have the connectivity for their enterprises? And this is an area that we are looking at. So there's a combined area that we need to look at. Digital skills provision, but then the first point is, do they have the connectivity for them to be able to use their skills effectively to manage their businesses? Next slide, please. So the other issue that comes up here is, what are successful examples of policies, programs, and platforms to strengthen digital skills at the national level? In Ghana, we have had what we call the ICT for Accelerated Development, and also the 5-year strategic plan of GIFEC, which addresses ICT skills for entrepreneurial and women empowerment program, entrepreneur and women empowerment program. This program has been very, very successful, such that women who are even in the informal sector, serving as entrepreneurs and in the markets and in their own enterprises, have been given skills. And the skills that they were given has improved their way of doing business, which has really given them skills in their financial management and even how to advertise their wares. This has contributed so much so that in most areas where businesses were failing, now it is doing very well. But the question here is that for us to provide continuous training for them, they need to be connected. Those that have not received the training need connectivity, and they fall within the bracket of persons in very rural and remote areas which do not have the infrastructure. Again, for coding for kids, we are providing coding for kids, and we've been able to train not less than 20,000 kids in area of coding, which is very impressive. But then for us to continue from there to advance this particular course, COVID era has been a hindrance, and there's the need for us to see how we can have connectivity in our homes or in even open spaces where these kids can take advantage, and then they will be taught coding and other things by way of connectivity. The community ICT centers need expansion, but these are public areas. And these public areas would, if we provide connectivity, people need to have their personal devices. And because the devices are for public use, it also creates another barrier. And these are challenges that we have. So we have adopted what we call train the trainer, so that one person could train others. But still, using this train the trainer, we still create a disadvantage also for those in rural areas who are not connected. Those who take advantage of these are only those persons who are found in the urban areas that have connectivity. And that is an issue which we are looking at. So in the past, it has been very successful. But then within the COVID era, we now have challenges that we need to address. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so some of the digital skill training programs that we have had are coding for kids, ICT for artisans, women empowerment, girls in ICT, which is part of the ITU program, ICT education for the youth, and ICT for teachers, education for teachers. All these programs have been very, very successful until March this year when we were confronted with the COVID. Now, expanding from here is becoming a big challenge for rural dwellers. For those in urban areas, the program is ongoing by online resources. But for those who are in the rural areas who are not connected, this is a challenge that we need to address. A challenge of connectivity, a challenge of devices. And then if these challenges are addressed, then the digital literacy program can go on and they would also benefit. Next slide. So here is a pictorial representation of women empowerment training that was held in about 3-4 communities, which gave training to about 1,500 women who are engaged in dressmaking, who are engaged in hairdressing, and who are market women who had not seen computers at all. But because of the kind of training, the basic ICT training that was offered, they were able to grasp the skills, and it is helping them in their businesses. Next slide. So what does the future job market look like, and how can we ensure young people have the required digital skills demanded by the industry? We have acknowledged by our assessment that tomorrow's job market will be highly digitized, transformational, and require innovation, and it requires what we consider to be lifelong learning. And if we can do lifelong learning, then it calls for digital skills, where you can continuously learn. Though we believe in face-to-face learning, but we think that the new normal is using the digital skills and learning online, which will be there for at least a short to medium term. So we want to ensure that there are policies that would provide equal opportunity for all, and these policies will then have to ensure that connectivity is made available in all sectors of the economy and in all areas within our rural communities. We also have to get public access to facilitate teaching and learning, and that one we have the community ICT centers that are available. However, the diversion that we need to have here is, even if it is public access, to provide a Wi-Fi facilitation, which will also make available devices for persons to own and use. And this will require extra budgetary considerations. Then access and device for all persons, especially persons with disability and those who are vulnerable. They need special devices which we need to provide for them. In the past, we have trained not less than 500 persons with disability in tertiary institutions and in basic schools. But now moving forward, the issue is that because we have made provision for public access or public use, personal devices will now have to be given. So you can see that though we started all these initiatives and policies very well, now here the emphasis has to be on how people will have their own personal devices, such that we can continue with the digital literacy programs that we have embarked upon. It is interesting and also very, very encouraging to note that within the last 3 years, from 2017 to date, we have trained not less than 537,000 persons on some of our, on the digitization literacy program. However, the fact that we have done this training called for continuous and scaling up the numbers. But because we are confronted with COVID, now the issue is that we need to get the rural persons, the rural areas, connected. And if the rural areas are connected, then we can continuously provide digital training. This is the question that we need to address. And we believe that together we'll be able to make this provision so that we can continue with the digitization agenda by providing more skills to address the skills gap for all sectors of our economy. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Kofi, and congratulations on those great results. And I think, as you mentioned, there's a lot more to be done all around the world, particularly in light of COVID and its consequences. So now we've come time for the Q&A. We have about 15 minutes for that. So what we will do is we'll pose a few of the questions that have come through and then come back to the panelists, invite you to answer which ones are most relevant to you and your experience. And then we'll get some more questions and come back. So the first one that I have here, Kofi, you'd mentioned about devices for persons with disabilities, and a few of the questions that have come up are talking about the needs of persons with disabilities, and including the fact that digital skills are of course important for all.
Sure.
What is being done to ensure that there's accessibility for persons with disabilities, perhaps including in relation to some of these e-learning platforms and digital skills tools? So persons with disabilities, this is one of the questions. Another one is that the research shows that it seems to be younger people who are accessing these to a higher degree than older persons. So any ideas for reaching older persons in the community? And there's a lot of interest in this issue of digital gap and how do we reach those who are marginalized and underserved, or perhaps in rural areas, and any other ideas that any of the panelists have for those strategies for reaching those would be great. So with that, perhaps if we go down the line with the panelists, since Kofi just spoke, we'll give you a little break, Kofi. And Susan, do you want to take any of those? And then we'll turn to the next speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ursula. Thank you also everybody for the great comments and questions in the chat and the Q&A functionality. And I would also like to congratulate Kofi on their programs. And I wanted to mention that we actually collaborate with GIFEC quite intensively as well on this issue, which is part of our Digital Transformation Center initiative. And GIFEC has been identified as one of the digital transformation centers with which we work in 10 countries right now. And this is one of the strategies, and I'm coming back now to one of the questions that Ursula just posed on how to reach out those in rural areas and how to bridge the digital divide through digital skills training, and how to make sure we can reach the marginalized groups. Because this is really the biggest challenge that we are facing, and you will probably see that a lot of the trainings that are offered now are perhaps not always addressed to those who are really offline and not using the technologies at all. And this is something that we also realized in ITU. We do a lot of capacity development in the field of digital skills, but more at the advanced level for professionals, for policymakers. But we realized that the main issue with bridging the digital divide and getting more people to benefit from the technologies is really to reach out to those marginalized groups and underserved communities and start to deliver training at the very basic level. I think one of the questions was also around that. We should have a basic a level to people who have not used the technologies before. And Kofi has provided some examples of that. And our Digital Transformation Center initiative is precisely trying to do that. So we are trying to work with local entities in some of those countries who have a network of community centers. And through those networks of local community centers, we try to deliver basic digital skills training to these marginalized groups. So they include youth.
Sorry, just in the interest of time, would you be able to include the link in the chat so people can learn more about that example? That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I will do that. And I just wanted to highlight that this is one of the initiatives that is that actually reaches to those groups. So
very good.
Ursula.
Thank you so much, Susan. Angus, any of those points, any of those questions that have come through that in your particular areas you want to highlight? For instance, perhaps accessibility of your e-learning programs for persons with disabilities is one example.
Yeah, I think that would be the one that I would do. By the way, I must apologize, Ursula. Apparently, when I showed my presentation, it wasn't in the right view, which illustrates a point that my digital literacy is not what it should be. but I'm over 40, so I kind of get a pass, I hope, for that, but apologies for that. Disability, absolutely a key focus area. Look, you know, there are layers to this. I mean, the UNCC Learn platform, for example, itself, the access point is adjusted so that if you are impaired visually or if you have hearing difficulties, that it has been adjusted for that. But then, of course, the next layer is the actual design of the actual courses, and they then have to be designed in a specific way. In fact, you would need 2 courses. So if you've got a course on, I don't know, children and climate change, you'd have one in the regular format, and then you would have a completely different, I mean, it's the same content, but it would be presented and designed in a different way. So that's the next layer. And then the third layer is, to what extent are disability issues actually being embedded into the content itself, so that we're reflecting, you know, that particular dynamic and that particular demographic. And so you know, it's a multi-layered question. I think we are making baby steps, but I think, you know, we know where we need to get to, and for us it's a big priority. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much. Kofi, let's turn now to you. Your presentation had some great examples and programs, but are there any other examples you'd like to share with us, or any other comments on those questions that we had flagged?
Yeah, well, in our case, persons with disability, you know, have special devices that they use with assistive technologies. And that is what we have been doing. We've been trying to first identify that in every community, there are persons with disability. So we have to dedicate a certain percentage of our equipment for such persons with disability so that they can take advantage of them when they enter our community ICT centers. Apart from that, we also give devices specifically to persons with disability. And then we do train the trainer. We train persons who can train the persons with disability, and then they go ahead to train them. And then persons with disability who also acquire the skills at higher levels can also train other persons. And that kind of thing goes on and on and on and on. So devices are very key because they are special. And then the skills that they use are also key. And you need to just train the trainer for us to achieve. We've done that in some basic schools here, Cropon School of the Blind for persons who are blind. And then we have also done that in some of the tertiary institutions. In the area of training for older persons, we also do that. For older persons who have never used a computer or seen the computer before, we try to do what is in line with the adult education. What used to be done in the adult education by the non-digitized manner is digitized. And we do so even for chiefs, traditional rulers. And we try to make it in such a way that we build cyber laboratories within the nearest environment where, or very close to them where they stay, and we give them regular tuition. Apart from that, we also go back to monitor the usage of the skills and the usage of the devices. So there's a monitoring mechanism that we have for these ones. Then come to the marginalized and underserved areas. In some underserved areas where we do not have connectivity, we have teamed up with the Ghana Library Board, where we have mobile vans that go into such rural areas to provide training, digital skills training, and also help them to have to read from the computers. So having done the digital training offline, we then have to provide devices. But now, for now, the devices that we provide are of public use. And so we go to schools, basic schools, and then we adopt one of the classrooms. We put in not less than 10 desktops with projectors, and the school children and the teachers are trained. And we train more teachers so that within the areas, the catchment area, the teachers would also provide training for other teachers. And they form what we call coding clubs. And that is how we are trying to propagate this kind of arrangement.
Thank you so much, Kofi. For a second there, I was muted and couldn't unmute myself. Thank you so much for all those further examples. Very helpful.
Oh, Ursula, could I jump in real quick?
Yeah, I was just turning to you actually.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah,
Sorry.
please do.
I wanted to jump in before we move topic.
Oh no, absolutely. We're not going to forget you. So yeah, please, if you can respond to any of those within your expertise. And I also just want to take this chance to invite the other speakers. Please do check out the chat and the Q&A because some of them are quite specific. I'm looking for a link or something. So I invite you also to check that out. Thanks, Stacey. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So definitely great responses so far, and I really appreciate hearing from each of them. And I think, you know, there's and lots of research that's shown that you kind of heard some great examples about the importance of the person-to-person interaction and teaching, which of course is extremely difficult right now. And so there's a program called P2PU, which I can put in a link in, which they really take kind of e-learning resources like MOOCs and kind of combine kind of in-person facilitation, which they have moved online now due to the pandemic. And especially for people with those basic skills or needing to learn those basic skills, they really having somebody to kind of help them and guide them through their learning, and especially at the beginning, is really important. And there's been some efforts here in the US to try to figure out how we can switch that to phone or kind of video support systems. And this something called digital navigators. But also kind of talking about just some of these communities that are really underserved and by technology. Again, kind of community-led solutions are really be the key here. I have a colleague here with Tasha that's done some work with community networking. So places that don't have any connectivity at all, and actually going in and making the actual connecting to the internet to community-led and community-involved process. So they can kind of determine, not only do they learn the technical expertise to be able to maintain their own networks, but they also are able to kind of determine how these networks and the technology is used in their own community. So I would say, really going back to the community, having the community, lead, and using these, using the resources, fantastic resources developed, but then really augmenting them for each individual community.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Stacey. We just only have a couple of minutes left. So before we wrap up, I wondered if there's any parting, like tweet-like length comment that the speakers would like to share with the audience, something really important, a key message you would like folks to walk away with from this message. So tweet-like means, of course, very, very short, like a phrase or a sentence. Who would like to go first? You want to raise your hand?
Okay, maybe I go first. So I would say one takeaway is that the digital divide is also a skills divide.
Great one. Who would like to go next? Or will I voluntask somebody? Kofi, what about you?
I can do it.
Stacey, go ahead. You, Stacey, yes.
Yes. So I would say that digital divides and digital inequities are almost always a reflection of societal inequities.
Mm-hmm. Good one. Angus or Kofi, who's next?
Yeah, I think the digital skills have become a necessity for all.
Very good, very good. Angus, lucky last.
My reflection is post-COVID. We've learned how to communicate in a different way, and it's largely through digital. So that's a big part of the future.
Yeah, so this session more important than ever, and fortunately this session's been recorded, so you can go back and check it out. It's going to be on the UNITAR YouTube channel, And perhaps someone from UNITAR could just weigh in. We've had a few questions about whether the PowerPoint presentations will also be available. If you could answer that in the chat or pipe up just before we close, that would be great. Just to recap, I mean, in this session, we've heard why digital skills are important, how to assess digital skills, the barriers to acquiring digital skills, how to reach segments of population who haven't had access, strategies and tools for overcoming barriers, examples of e-learning, benefits of specific e-learning programs, and so much more. So we'd like to say thank you so much to all of you for tuning in. Thank you so much for the fantastic questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to get them all. And thanks to our wonderful speakers. Any last word from UNITAR on whether the PowerPoint presentations are available?
Yes, I'll just pipe in and say that all the presentations will be available on the SDG Learn website underneath this session's title, and there'll also be a link to that in the description of the YouTube video. So we'll make sure everyone has access.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Harris. And thanks. It's great to have you on the screen right now, Harris, because I'd like to reiterate how much we appreciate all the work that you and your team put in to have this whole session run so smoothly. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.